So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what I really feel is the cause for a lot of the destruction of some Black males. And I know some people want to blame it on women because women are the easiest, are the closest people to blame. And some people will say, oh, it started in the home and it was because of my mother, or my mother wasn't nurturing, she wasn't loving. And there may well be some issues with some people's home lives. And you can't necessarily throw all of that out, but you also have to realize that these Black boys come from Black mothers who also are falling victim to the same system that tries to be destructive towards Black men. And they don't really do much trying, they actually succeed. And so here, this article is in that the it's what you call the advocate, and I don't really hear many people talking about this. And by being in the educational field, I've tried to be honest to people to tell them some of the things that I've seen um, along the way with African American students versus students who are not seen or viewed as African American, that they're viewed as either Hispanic or white or something of another culture. So this article is entitled Black Boys in Crisis, Eliminating the School to Prison Pipeline. And, and it's systematically calculated nationality group. And believe it or not, some people don't even know about this, but there is a such thing called a prison to pipeline that starts from school on forward. And so I believe this was put in place specifically really for Black people, to target Black people. And so in the series appropriately titled Black Boys in Crisis, it says here that they highlighted the problems facing Black boys in education, as well as provided clear steps that will lead them out of the crisis. But people don't listen, they don't want to read, and it's easy to blame people who are your loved ones or who made mistakes along the way in their lives. Maybe they had trauma in their lives, they went through their own set of experiences. And so it's unfair to blame Black females who are the mothers, the sisters, the daughters, the cousins, and the helpmeets of Black males most of the time. I say I say 85% of the time to 90% of the time, there is a Black mother, there's a Black auntie, Black sisters, cousins, family members who are supportive of Black males. And they also face the same sets of discriminations. They can be in prison, they can be shot by the police and murdered, they can be killed, they can be raped by the police. They can also be discriminated against the same way, but even harder because of being a female. So, all of the males who are insecure, the ones who are like this, who don't want to hear this and don't want to admit the truth that there's been a system that is set up, always has been in place to go against not just Black males, but Black females, Black people in general. And they target the first thing that would be protective of the Black community is Black males. And it starts with Black boys when they're young. And so Black boys' learning styles and social skills are often misconstrued as problems by educators. So there's different people have different talents and different learning skills. Some people are audio, some people are visual, and some people are more tactile. Some people, in other words, some people learn by seeing things, by hearing things, or they have to actually have a hands-on feel for what it is in order to absorb that information. So those who are disadvantaged are coming from disadvantaged homes are often accustomed to activity rather than sitting still, and to shouting and argument as a means of communication. So these do not translate well in the classroom. So some people, cultures have a tendency to do things different than others. And so when it comes to African American community, it's the same applies. And so if a kid has a family, they're bustling and, they speak in a higher pitch, or they don't normally just sit down and stay in one place. They're pretty active people. So that kid has the same types of ways about themselves because of their culture. And then they bring it to the classroom, but it's viewed as something bad. It's not embraced and accepted. Because when you go into these schools, they celebrate the Hispanic culture. They put up pictures of Hispanic, what they would think would be Hispanic, celebrating their culture and their customs. But you don't really often see enough celebrating of the Black culture. It's ignored, it's not talked about, it's not celebrated as much, and that's not on purpose. It's to send a message early on and to scolding of Black children quickly and suspending them and disciplining them swiftly versus other students because they're not Black. That's not on purpose either, by accident. It's meant to be, it is on purpose, but it's meant to be put in place as the norm because they want to send a message that this is who you are, and we know, and we want you to know who you are. And so they're already learning at an early age that they're discriminated in society. So these, like it says, do not translate well in the classroom. So just the normal activities that Black people do. So the result is that the Black boys do not receive the most effective forms of discipline, lessons, and peer interaction opportunities. And so I have seen this honestly myself. And I'm going to break it down and tell you the truth that there's a system that is put in place against Black people. Even in the school systems, it has been set up because what you're learning in these school systems is white history. You're learning about American history, which is basically white history. Some of these books are wiping out the history, if they haven't already, of what Black people have encountered, even before slavery. They don't acknowledge Black people or Black culture in the positive sense enough. It's not stressed enough. They have these huge celebrations, these huge parties for Hispanic culture. And I believe that this system is the same system that tries to break people apart and separate people and make people fight and create divisions with different minority groups. And I believe that is set up to destroy, to put people at odds and put people in argument and disagreement and to hate one another and to destroy each other because ultimately they don't want any of us around. And Hispanic people think that they're liked, but they're not waking up that they're also being set up. They just use this Hispanic culture to try to go against Black people because they don't like them either. So they figure if you both destroy one another, we don't have to deal with none of you. And so that's what they don't understand. They are thinking that Black people necessarily are going against them when we haven't. This system is set up against Black people and also Hispanic, but this is about Black boys in crisis. because they definitely target our Black children. And so they start early, and they started in these schools, and they put teachers there specifically to teach these kids that you're Black and you're discriminated. And they do it in ways where they don't say it, it's what they show. And so it's the forms of discipline, the way they teach them. Some don't even teach the kids. They just send them to school, because at one while they were sending kids to school, and they would put them on these basketball teams. They know that, your Black kids, they have gifts of athleticism. And so they figure, well, they if they can't read or write, then they can do athletic events. And so what happens with that. That's a whole nother story in and of itself. And some men will tell you about how Black men have been used in as athletes, and how they've been treated. And when their bodies are all beat up, you know, what have you got to show for it? So the lack of learning leads to higher school dropout levels, higher rates of poverty, and ultimately higher incarceration rates. So a lot of them end up going straight from dropping out of school to these prisons. So high school dropouts in all demographics have a higher likelihood of incarceration at some point in their lives. And so I'm going to add in here too, if you have people that don't have no hope, and it's just poverty and a life of no hope, and they're thrown in these prisons, and they're not with their girlfriends and with their wives and with their mothers, and they don't have any really connection with females except but inside of a prison, and they wish they could get out. And you have these guys in prison who, they're human, they're guys. Some aren't gay, and they have this thing where in order to exhibit your masculinity, you have to be tough, you have to protect your group, and you have to affiliate yourself with certain gangs. And that's how some of them get involved in that. And then also you have to exert your manhood by survival of the fittest attitude and mentality. And then some guys end up raping guys, or falling victim to rape in these prisons. And this system that is set up knows this. They know that this is what's going to happen. So those guys, if they are able to get out, they've been violated, they've been raped, they've been abused, they've been told that they can't vote, they've been told that they're no longer wanted in the community, that there has been or washed up. There's some success stories, but very rare, because there's a lot of anger and there's a lot of regret and resentment. And so the system is set up against Black women because they put these, all these programs are lined up for people who are poor, or either people who are disadvantaged. But most of the time, the people who are disadvantaged, they didn't do it by themselves necessarily. It's not always that way. It was set up that way so that people can give up. So some people don't have enough motivation after they've been told that they're not wanted, they're not accepted, and they're not needed, or they're not smart enough, or like what the two anchor white women had said, even though you study hard and you study for your lessons to get accepted to 20 universities, like one young man did, that it's obnoxious and ridiculous. It's not celebrated. Black people are not celebrated like other cultures are. So a Black boy who drops out of high school simply does not have the educational background to land a high-paying job. So he may wind up trying to make ends meet by engaging in petty crimes. So this may include thievery. It may include selling of drugs. Increasingly, though, Black boys are incarcerated for facts that show that also they're accused of crimes they haven't committed. And things are planted on them. Drugs are planted on. There's stories about Black males who have been incarcerated for crimes they didn't even commit. So they've been targeted for a long time by a system that's set up that way. So for being suspected of smoking marijuana, and now the laws have changed on that, that's why I had asked, are they going to let all these people go now since they've changed things? Or like Khalif Browder, they are simply unjustly incarcerated for crimes that they did not even commit. That's what I said before I even read it. So all too often, this unjust punishment has a basis in racism. It's always been rooted in that. And so some people don't want to receive the truth. They're angry. So the best way to take your anger out is on other Black folks, to hate yourself, to hate the Black community for being Black, to say bad things on news media, to trash Black folks as a whole, to also bash Black females, because you got to bash the Black females for your troubles and for being targeted by a system that's put in place to target all of us. And so that's why you get all those commentators that do all that stuff. That's the reason why, because they on the inside are not being honest to the Black community and even themselves. They hate themselves. So the best way to hate yourself is to either kill yourself, is what some of these people, some will do, and they do it slowly with drugs, or they turn against the whole entire Black community altogether. So all too often, it says this unjust punishment has a basis in racism, which I do believe. So the school to prison pipeline indicates that there is a relationship between minority young men who are disciplined from kindergarten on up to 12th grade through suspensions, expulsions, and I have seen this. And when you try to say something as a Black instructor and administrator, and you try to fight against it, the system in the school system is set up against people who speak out. So, and those who end up incarcerated later in life, that's what happens. So here are the alarming statistics. So anybody that wants statistics is here. You can find it here. Black students are nearly 4 times as likely to face suspension as their white peers. Suspensions of Black high schoolers students have increased 11 times more quickly than white peers since the 1970s. So it's gotten worse, not any better. And that was closer to the time in the 1970s. That's around the time that I, remember. That's closer to the civil rights era. It's sort of like on the end of it. And still it was thriving then. But now, it seems like it's escalated, like we are reverting. So the students suspended during their freshman year are 2 times as likely to end up dropping out of high school. So nearly 68% of all men in the federal prison never earned a high school diploma. And so a lot of times what some of these instructors will do is they'll teach and they won't help the students that are Black. They'll help all the other students, or they help do stuff with all the other students. They're not as motivating to the Black students. They're motivating to the Hispanic students, to the other students that are white. Or they have schools where all the white students will go because they don't want to be with the Hispanic and Black students. And see, Hispanics don't want to hear that. They want to be included in the white community, but whites don't like you either. And they don't realize that. You're not 100% to them white. You got something else in you, then you ain't white. So they look down on you too. That's why they have all these laws coming against you. They're just doing it to you all in a different way. But with us, we've always known this is here. But what Black people are dealing with is Black people who hate other Black people. There's this war on war against Black people who hate themselves against other Black folks. And so they put those people on the news so they can speak. Those people have a platform so they can speak out. Because you know why? They want to use them as a tool, a weapon against Black people to destroy our culture and who we are and our being, because they've always been against us. So what better way to use it rather than have white people get up there, because you can't have white people say all these bad things about Black people. Well, they do still, but what better way to destroy the Black culture is to have other Black people who hate themselves talk against their own culture. So breaking this down by the state leads to more troubling statistics. In Indiana, 95% of all suspensions in 2002 to 2003 occurred as a result of minor offenses such as disruptive behavior. In Colorado, 1 in every 7 Black students is disciplined in school, though just 1 in every 25 white students faces the same disciplinary actions. Okay, so a study published by the University of Pennsylvania reports that Black students make up 39% of the students suspended in Florida, though they only account for 23% of the public school population in the state. We just had the big rally, the gun rally, and at first they put all the white students at the forefront, like they're fighting for gun rights. And you didn't see any Black people. And then they had to have, like, somebody, a Black person, to say something, to speak on the behalf of white people and what their cause is, so that they can rally and lift them up and put them in the Time magazine and fight for their thing. But it really doesn't work because it's counteractive, because you still have people that are going to do things to get guns. You're going to ignite more people to get guns. And most of the guns, what white people won't tell you, that are doing all this rallying about being against guns, that a lot of these Black communities, these smaller Black communities, the Black people don't put those guns there. It's white people doing it because they want us to shoot each other and kill each other and destroy each other. And I'm just being honest. And see, they're not telling people this, and they like to put all this crap in the news about how they fighting for the rights of people. They're fighting for what they want to talk about, what they believe in, what their religion is. All of the stuff that's been created here in America is about them. And if you don't fall in line with it, it's something wrong with you. That's the way they look at it. So though they only account for 23% of the public school population in the state, is what it's saying. So the study notes that Black students are suspended and expelled more due to unfair discipline practices and appearing to be disrespectful or threatening. Now, I've seen Black kids that as soon as they buck up, like they're going to get into an altercation with another kid, they quickly do the paperwork to suspend those kids. And I've seen Hispanic kids, they'll kick their parents, cuss their parents, cuss the teachers, jump all over on the tables and the chairs, fall all out on the floor, spit all over the place, spit on the teacher. And if the principal brings his butt up in the room, they'll spit on him too, but they don't get suspension. They get a talking, or they get sent to another room or put in a corner, and they coddle them. And this is not a good thing, because you enable those people to know that I can do whatever I want and I won't be punished for it. But when Black people do something, as soon as you open your mouth or rear your hand up, you're going to be punished to the full extreme. So they teach kids this early, and I'm not afraid to say it. So drilling down to the county levels throws up even more dire statistics. In Orange County in Central Florida, Black students represent 51% of the students suspended, though they account for 27% of the county's public school population. And in Chicago public school system, over a third of African American boys were suspended at some point during 2013 to 2014 in the school year. 8% of the nation's public school students are Black. but an estimated 40% of all the students that are expelled from U.S. schools are Black. This is not by accident. This is just the norm. This is what has always been happening. And they don't want you to talk about this. They want to silence you. They want you to ignore what's really going on. So this makes Black students over 3 times more likely to face suspension or expulsion than their white peers. And when you add in Latino numbers, 70% all in school arrests are Black or Latino students. So the Latin people, you need to wake up to, because they don't like you either. And if you hadn't been watching the news, or you've been living under a rock, or you want to insist on thinking that Blacks have set this system up, we haven't. We're in the same boat. And you need to get off your soapbox and get out of your feelings and learn that you is also being hunted, but silently. Not really that silently, because now we see it, because Jeff Sessions went to the border and told you what he feels, that he doesn't care about your families being separated. So you need to learn too. You're going to learn today. So this makes Black students over 3 times, I'm going to say it again, more likely to face suspension or expulsion than their white peers. So when you add in Latino numbers, is 70% of all in-school arrests are Black or Latino students. So that includes you. So you ain't out the mix, the ones who think they want to be white. So match this to the 61% of the incarcerated population that is Black or Latino, despite the fact that these groups only represent 30% of the U.S. population when combined. Approximately 250,000 teens are tried as adults every year. So these are the things that people are not reading that they should be reading. They should be looking at as why these are happening. These things are happening, they've been there. Sometimes for minor offenses, these kids are put in suspension or expulsion, or they're sent to prison early on as teens. So the offenses stem from school scuffles. Kids that just get in debates, or they're upset with one another. They got in a little squabble. So they make a big deal out of it and heighten it more. But what do we see in some of these other schools where you have some of these other children who are bringing assault style rifles? So in North Carolina, the New York, for example, all 16 to 17 years old are automatically tried as adults. Students led from school in handcuffs due to disruptive behavior are suddenly facing an adult record automatically. And that puts them at risk for not getting into college and finding stable jobs. So almost always the problems that lead to their arrest are better suited for mediation, in other words, mediation within the school walls. And an issue we'll look at later in a series. So they say there's a series about this. So as noted earlier, so these people are actually pretty much doing the stats on this, but nobody's saying anything about it. Nobody's talking about it. And they don't want you to know about it, because they figure since we got a culture that won't read, that you're not going to look at this stuff. You're not going to care. You're just going to blame it on the easiest and the closest person to you, Black females. So as noted earlier, students who drop out of high school have much higher chances of ending up in prison. The fact that Black students are suspended at much higher rates than their white peers points to a direct correlation between discipline in grade school and a place in a prison cell. So given the above, the fact that the U.S. has the highest incarceration rates in the world is no surprise. So the road to lockup starts in the public school system. And it starts with unfair punishment. And this is what I've been trying to kind of bring out, because I didn't want people to say, oh, she's just some Black crazy woman that's just making this shit up. But I'm not, because I've seen it done and it's unfair. And when you speak on it as a Black instructor, a Black person, just take a look. Find out what neighborhoods are like, and what the schools are like and who all the teachers are and what are they learning in those schools. How do they celebrate Black history at all? At all? What do they do? How do they celebrate the Latin history? What do they do? What kinds of stuff do they talk about in their history books? What are they telling the kids? How do they do their disciplines? And how many kids have been suspended? Things like that. But people use these schools as dumping grounds, big babysitter houses. And so this is the problems that we have. And then some of these neighborhoods are not really up to par. And so they have a lack of funding. So what do you think is going to happen? So here you see in here, it says poverty and classism. And I want to mention that because poverty is always a problem. Bias, profiling, violence, and then you have ignorance and addictions, and then classism. All of the people who have money, and I'm not necessarily saying that it's just whites that have, there's some Black people who will acquire money, some Hispanic people that acquire money, but how do they treat their peers that don't have any money? Sometimes they'll turn against you as well. They'll turn against you and blame you for the problems. Instead of them blaming a system that's set up to target specific folks that are in an economic category and then racial category, no, they blame the people. It's your fault. You know, somehow they got lucky. Somebody acquired money and they were able to get out of it. Or they were not as bad off as the next. So they put their brother or their sister down. They put people down that look just like them. Because it's easier to do that. It's easier to blame all of the problems on poor people, on people that are automatically targeted. It's easy for Black people to get on these news stations and say things against Black people that are negative because they've been put there, they've been placed there to do this. It's all premeditated and calculated for them to sit there and do this type of stuff. It's set up that way. And that's what they want the message to be conveyed, that it's easy to blame the people who are the ones that are the targeted, rather than blame the ones who have put the system in place. So that article I just read was put out September 21st, 2017. So that wasn't long ago. So they had an article in 2016 that was Black Boys in Crisis, the school to prison pipeline in education. It says, sadly, over half of the Black young men who attended urban high schools do not earn a diploma. And so it has the statistics. They have been following this for several years. And there's an article that was put out here. So Black women are not your enemy either, because there's another article that talks about how Black females are also targeted. Black female students can't have an opportunity to succeed if they're being criminalized in the classroom. Policies put Black girls on the school to prison pipeline too. So we are treated the same way, but even worse because of being female. And people are not looking at this. They refuse to look at the truth and to read what the truth is. And so you have young Black girls who are targeted the same way and worse. So the following is an opinion piece, but it's true. So when they should be focusing on their education, Black girls experience the painful effects of both misogyny and racism that children just shouldn't face. So whether it's the hairstyle, we're targeted for our hair, challenging authority, or simply existing in a dominantly white space, Black girls can be criminalized for nothing more than being themselves, Black and female. So this is a major part of the cause of race and gender-based school to prison pipeline, in which increased disciplinary action for students of color in the school system leads to an increased likelihood that they will also end up in the criminal justice system. And so you guys got to get this out of your head, blaming black women when we also are facing the same scrutiny, if not worse. Because remember, black women have a, if you're a real woman, of course, you have, you know, a different body part. So you can be raped, you can be mutilated as well. So there's a whole article with statistics on this as well. And so it goes on to say earlier this year in Massachusetts, 15-year-old twins, Deanna and Maya Cook, were suspended from school for wearing their hair in braids. The school, Mystic Valley Regional, said that their hair violated the school's dress code and put their parents had argued that the disciplinary actions were racially motivated. So in Florida, there was a similar case when North Florida Christian School gave an ultimatum to a 17-year-old Genesis Johnson to cut her afro or leave the school the following year. So in 2015, a 16-year-old student in South Carolina was shown to be violently ripped from her desk by the school resource officer, Ben Fields, at the school Spring Valley High School in a video that went viral. After the violent arrest, the student who was assaulted and her classmate, 18-year-old Nia Kinney, who filmed the incident, faced a misdemeanor charge for disrupting school. So they target black women even harder. Even harder. It's a different way, but it's even the same and harder. So parents of students at the Spring Valley High School and community activists speculated if Officer Fields would have treated the white female student the same way. So it goes on to talk about how the comparison of the treatments of students. Okay. It goes on and on to talk about this stuff. Said that, what would have happened if it had been a white student? That wouldn't happen because they wouldn't treat the white students like that. Because first of all, they probably wouldn't even go to school with them. So black girls in school are often left out of this topic, okay, of the school to prison pipeline discussion because of all the disciplinary and disparity between boys and girls. So there's this gender thing where women are there more on females. When you're a black female, it's harder. So according to the metrics from the U.S. Department of Education Office for Civil Rights, black boys are more likely to be suspended than any other student group. But recent studies have shown that black girls are being suspended and disciplined in the schools at higher rates in every state in the U.S. Okay, and so I don't think people are reading this either. So black girls is talking about how they're also treated, are often left out. And so I just read that. So a 2015 report by African American Policy, which is AAPF, in partnership with Columbia University Law, showed black girls in both New York and Boston account for 28%. 28% and 35% of the enrollment respectively, and are disciplined at a rate 10 times higher in New York and 11 times higher in Boston than their white counterparts. So AAPF found that on average, black girls face a higher risk of expulsion because of racial bias and are suspended 6 times more often than white girls, which marks them as at-risk youth early. According to a report from the Sentencing Project, a criminal justice reform nonprofit, more men are incarcerated than women, and 1 in 6 black men will face incarceration in their lifetime. In that same report, the Sentencing Project found on average, black men and boys are still the highest population in over 11 state prisons. So they also make up more than half of the prison population in the states like Alabama and Delaware, Louisiana. Currently, there are 1.2 million women who are incarcerated serving probation or on parole or have spent time in jail. The Sentencing Project found that between 2000 and 2014, the rate of women being incarcerated increased 700%. 700%, and that is African American women that are in prison at twice the rate of the white peers. Let me read that again. The rate of women being incarcerated increased at 700%, y'all. And that is African American women who are in prison at twice the rate of their white peers. So Black girls need the support of the community and leaders and school officials to ensure their future success as well. According to the Washington Post, Black girls make up just 16% of America's female population, but they account for 1/3 of all female arrests that happen on school grounds across the country. So criminalizing young Black girls may lead to the a bad, what you call the once a bad kid, always a bad kid thing. That's what it's quoted. So it's a label that they place on Black girls. This is systematically calculated, people. It is not by accident. So it has shown that Black youth are often perceived as older or less innocent, okay, than their peers, okay, which often results in harsher disciplinary measures because the children are held to a higher standard of maturity level, when in reality, they're just children. So Black women's health matters as well. That's another read. Okay, so that's just another read. Black girls need the support of the community leaders and the school officials to ensure their future success. Organizations like At the Well rather, and Nonprofit Leadership Academy to empower Black girls and Black Girls Code, a group that promotes STEM, what is called STEM, learning for young women of color, are all also necessary mentorship programs or opportunities for Black girls to thrive. And so it says, if you're interested in supporting the organizations and building the self-confidence of Black women, here's how, so you can take action. So if you want to look at this article, it's in Vice Impact. And so, yes, Black girls are also marginalized. Black females, Black girls in school, and Black females are dealing with the same issues. We are not the destruction of the Black community when we are also Black and being destroyed in the same fashion, and if not worse. So those are lies that people are putting out on YouTube, saying that Black women, single Black women, are destroying Black men and feminizing them. Let me tell you something. This system is set up against all of us. And the system that is set up against us, if you go to prison and you're cramped in those quarters with other men and you weren't gay before you got out, that's what has caused a lot of this HIV and all of this stuff coming out. And, these men that won't tell you that they've been raped when they've been put in these prisons, they've been violated, or they've got hepatitis, and they bring this home to the girlfriends and the wives. And then the women that are going to the prisons, they're being locked away, taken away from their fathers, their families, and there's a disconnect. So, yes, that's what's been happening. That's what's destroying the Black community. These are some of the things, if not most of what has been a calculated destruction of us as a culture and a people. With that being said, like, comment, subscribe, and thanks for listening.